Welcome back to another episode of the Working Audio Tools podcast. Slight change of proceedings today because it is just myself. Paul is unfortunately ill. He's down with a chest infection and didn't feel up to being able to breathe enough to be able to do the episode. So Paul, we wish you well. We'll miss you, but I have plenty of things to talk about, including some really helpful applications and software that if you haven't heard of will hopefully really help you as professional working audio tools, as professional mix and mastering engineers. Or if you're like myself and Paul and on your way to trying to become full-time mix engineers, we'll touch a bit more on my personal journey because there's been quite a few developments on that front in the background a little bit later on. But first of all, I want you guys to get something valuable out of this episode, as I hope you always do. So let's dive into the computer because there's three things I want to show you that have really helped the way I work with clients and how professionally I can deliver and make my business look. So the first thing is an application called Mix-to-Mobile, and this is basically an app you get for your phone. I believe it might just be iOS for now. Don't take my word for that. Worth checking on the website. As you can see, it does cost $40, but this is really great because we've spoken about translation a lot and listening to your tracks and mixes on and masters on different systems, and translation is key. And as we discussed in last week's episode, that is one of the things that is making the great mix engineers so good at what they do. Their tracks just sound great on any system, regardless of what it is. This application connects to, there's a plugin for your DAW, and it links up to your phone. You connect your phone to your computer either via Wi-Fi on your local network or via, lightning cable or USB-C cable, whatever you've got. All mobile phones will be USB-C very soon, by the way, including iPhones, if you didn't know that. That EU law was passed, and that affects all mobile phones in the UK as well. I believe the iPhone 15 may even be USB-C. So what you can do basically is stream your audio directly from your DAW onto your phone. Now that enables you to then do several things. You can listen through your phone speakers. Don't forget, if you turn your phone sideways, you'll get the full stereo image of your speakers. From there, what I do is I can then link that to my general reference headphones, which I use in the gym. I know so well because I listen to so much music on them. I can connect them to my Anchor Soundcore speaker, which is this little guy here. This is kind of a Bluetooth speaker. You see loads of Bose ones. It sounds like it's not too dissimilar to the Alexa stuff. So it's a very consumer-based device. Sounds fucking terrible, quite frankly, but that's kind of the point. In that it's very middly. If you don't have any 200 hertz on your bass or kick drums, they're not going to be audible on these speakers. So you basically got a 200 hertz to 10K frequency range, which a lot of listening devices have. So that's good for referencing your tracks. Also, it compresses certain frequencies so different things pop out. Very mid-range focused. It limits quite heavily as well. So different things will pop out of the mix. So it's a very good indicator of a balanced mix or not. And all that for me is coming off this application and plugin called Mix-to-Mobile. Next up, once we've got our mix sounding great and we can deliver it to the client, so that we're not sending mixes or masters via WhatsApp or something which destroys the audio quality. Please don't do that if anyone's doing that. This is the perfect solution. MixUp.Audio by PureMix. And there is a free version, which I use, and there's a paid version as well, which has some benefits, but the free version is everything you really need. So what you do is you simply load up a project. I'm mixing a track for my friend Mike at the moment, who runs the Creative Source YouTube channel. If you guys know that, Mike is a wonderful YouTuber and a thoroughly good dude. So what I've got here is I've got mix one. Now, how I label things is I'll do like 3 versions of a mix before I even send it to a client, because I want to listen to it on different systems, listen to it the following day with fresh ears. Before I decide it's in the best place, I can get it. And then I'll send it to the client. So I'll label that client mix 1. So he can basically stream this. And this is in WAV. This is full WAV quality. It's only 16 bits, so it could be a bit better, but realistically, that's all we're listening to anyway. So they can listen to the track. Then you can upload another version or another revision, and they can go between the tracks, hear the changes, hear the improvements. You can match the LUFS levels as well, and also give you a readout for how loud your track is, which I'm sure you're keeping aware of in your DAW anyway. Then you can share the link. You can password protect it. I think that's a pro feature. That's a paid for feature. But you can also change the links anytime if you don't want someone to have the link, you can just change it to kind of password protected and then only send the link out to those people who you want to have access to the track. So, for example, if you're working in a WhatsApp group with, I've done WhatsApp groups with the artist, 2 producers, 2 recording engineers, an A&R guy and a manager who all thought they could have an opinion on the track. It's fair enough. That's from what we hear. Like Prizzy, for example, touched on this in one of our previous interviews. That was great if you haven't seen that. You often get a lot of feedback, as I'm sure you all know. So this is a great way of sending everyone the same link. It's not getting lost in emails, that you're not forgetting to attach it in an email. And then the best bit is people can leave comments in real time. So if we look at Superman Mix 1 here, Mike gave me his revisions and everything is time-stamped, so I know exactly where he means. Now, the best bit of this is if I have the plugin which comes with this in my DAW, it will highlight in my DAW where the timestamps are exactly on the timeline. And I haven't got that set up at the moment, so I can't show you. But you can basically import all this into your DAW, so you're not swapping between windows. It's a really helpful tool. I think it's a really professional way of presenting your tracks to people, to clients, in a way that they can't download it unless you give them permission to, i.e. once you've been paid. They can't rip it or anything. And actually, the response I've had is that people think it's a very professional way of delivering versions and revisions. So that is MixUp.Audio. I'll leave links to all this stuff in the video description as well. The next application, which I've found really useful, is actually brand new. This is really helpful if you're someone like me who's trying to develop a client base and you want a format to deliver people before and after examples of your work. This is something Chris Graham talked about on our interview with him. Another fascinating interview. And that's how he really established his mastering business, was having before and after examples so people can hear exactly what you're doing. The only thing this doesn't do is automatically level match things for you, which is something I feel they could add in. We'll look at their price packages in a minute. Now, I know this is very new because I stumbled across it on a search for a music player to embed in my website on Squarespace. The music player they have is absolutely dog shit. If you're using it, don't, because it's probably got worse audio destruction than WhatsApp. So I wanted a standalone one that would work. Came across a forum post that was a matter of days old. Came to SoundToggle, and I was very fortunate in that the first 100 people, they gave a lifetime access to the application. So thank you guys at SoundToggle for that. I immediately sent that to Paul and a few other people that I know. So they got on board with that. There is, I believe, now a 50% off. If you're in the next 72 people, this has probably gone down by the time this video comes out, but if you're in the next 72 people, you can get 50% off, which I think is going to be good value for money. If we look at the pricing structure here. Okay, so basic plan, $6, pretty cheap. What's that, £5? Popular plan without the logo. Now, what I've noticed is, so it is lossless audio, or at least the version I've got is, and I assumed it'd be lossless audio throughout. So SoundToggle, if you're listening, I kind of think the selling point of your product is lossless audio. Otherwise, we'd be on SoundCloud, which is shit. So slightly disappointed that's not included in the basic plan, if I'm honest, SoundToggle. However, I understand you have to structure a business, and that's a big selling point. But the interesting thing with the Pro plan that I've just seen is a 3-way toggle. And as I've been learning mastering in the last couple of weeks, having a rough mix, a full mix, and a mastered version all in one 3-way toggle, that is going to be a great feature. So I look forward to getting hold of that if I can at some point. So the point of SoundToggle is, I'll show you on my website, because you can customize the colors and it looks really good. And right at the top, now I've put this here on the website because then that's the first thing that comes up on the mobile phone view. You've got this before and after, and basically literally swipe the toggle and you hear the before and after. And I've uploaded 6. I think now with the basic package, you can only upload 3 tracks, but with the mid-band package, you can get up to 10 and multiple playlists. So for example, my next job is when I get some more mastering work under my belt, I'm going to put a mastering page on my website and use SoundToggle for that as well. So before and after examples, I think it's a really good way of giving your clients, just a realistic idea of what you're actually doing, because I think audio can be very difficult to quantify. And I guess they're leaving the level matching option up to you, because you might be a purist like Paul and say, no, everything's got to be level matched, and it's just wrong. He's so picky about that stuff. But from an impressing a client point of view, you know, if your mix has an extra 4 or 5 dB, or your master has an extra 5 or 6 dB and louder sounds better, it's going to make you look better. So that's a decision for you. Let me know what you guys would do in the comments. Do you share stuff like this? Do you have an alternative? Is there any software that you've been looking at that has caught your eye recently and helps your job delivering and presenting files to clients even better? Let me know in the comments. Let us know. Paul will see these as well and no doubt respond as and when he feels better. All right, while we're here, just a quick shout out. I am currently studying Streaky's mastering courses. After the Chris Graham interview, I figured there were 2 dominoes I could immediately get in line. He talks about getting your dominoes in a row, or getting your ducks in a row, and figuring out the next thing to benefit your career. And for me, it was learning Pro Tools. I've been learning Pro Tools. That's been fascinating. We'll get onto that in a minute. And then the next thing I felt was mastering, purely because I'm an advocate of learning as many different angles on what we're doing as possible. For example, I've said it before on the podcast, if you play an instrument and you play rock, but you learn how to play jazz, it's going to improve your musicality, your coordination, your sense of dynamics, your awareness of song structures, your technique in different ways. It's going to challenge you in different ways, and that will help your rock playing. Just as if you're mixing, I think having an understanding of the recording process is absolutely vital. And I also think having an understanding of the mastering process is important, so you can learn. And what I'm trying to do and get out of this is exactly how my mixing is affecting the mastering. And so far, it's been very interesting. It is a very, very different mindset, actually more of a different mindset than I quite anticipated. You know, tuning into like a 1/4 and 1/2 decibel increments and really paying attention to the width of the cue point, that's been eye-opening. But really small differences, really small changes can make such a massive difference. So that's been a really interesting thing to learn. And hopefully, A, that will improve my ears, and B, improve my awareness of how my mixing is affecting mastering, which is the point of the exercise. So if you mix and you don't master, I would encourage you to try that as well. And also, as we know, a lot of clients want a one-stop shop. They want mixing and mastering. A lot of people don't understand the difference between mixing and mastering, and sometimes it's just easier to say, yes, I can mix and master. They don't need to understand the difference. You know, phrases like, yeah, can you mix my master? Get thrown around, and you have those face palming moments, or you can turn that into a positive and a business opportunity, which is what I'm trying to do at the moment. And at some point, when I feel confident, I'm not going to rush into this, I'll probably offer mastering as an additional service on the website using Sound Toggle. Now, I've always been a bit wary about mastering. I've never wanted to claim I'm a mastering engineer, because I do believe to do a proper job, you need a third-party set of ears, someone who specializes in that, an expert in mastering. It is a bit of I used to think it was a dark art until I've done this course, and actually now I don't think it's a dark art. It's actually relatively simple. But I do think having someone with a third perspective, fresher ears, I used to say a better monitoring system, but I can't necessarily use that as an excuse anymore. But having someone else have a listen, I think, is invaluable, because they're going to pick up things you don't. You're not going to have your preconceived biases. You're so used to mixing the track, you know what it sounds like. Now, the difficulty with that as well is I foresee for myself is I will hear things when I'm mastering and want to go back into the mix and fix it, and I can only imagine that's going to take some quite strong discipline to say, no, the mix is done, fucking leave it, because art is merely abandoned. It's never finished, but merely abandoned. So that's going to be an interesting journey for me to go on. What do you guys think? Do you have that? Do you mix and master your own stuff? And is it difficult to separate the two, or what's your process for that? I've been mastering so far in Pro Tools, which is great because the routing makes sense. It's a bit trickier in Logic. I'm still mixing in both Logic and Pro Tools. The reason I wanted to go down Pro Tools was hanging out with MSM engineer, who we had on one of the first iterations of this version of the podcast. I was picking his brains about potentially assisting him, setting up mixes for him. And he just said, nah, you're in Logic. I can't do it. And I was like, all right, well, that's just an obvious next step. I'll learn Pro Tools. How hard can it be? Yeah. Well, those who've done that change, I don't need to explain anything. But for those using Logic, what I realized is just how much work Logic is doing behind the scenes to make things easy for you. So I've never worked on an analog console in a studio. Obviously, I've balanced stuff on them. I've had the opportunity to play with them briefly, but I've not worked on them in a professional format. Live sound desks, yes, I've done analog desks, but I don't know, they're just a bit more simple, I feel. And then obviously digital live sound desks, I know those through and through. So Pro Tools is obviously very much set up based for the analog console format of mixing, whereas a Logic is a bit more, I don't want to say intuitive, but the best analogy I can think of is iPhone versus Android. You pull an iPhone out, it just works. Everything's there immediately to use right in front of you. You don't have to do anything. They're very consumer friendly. I would describe, for those of you who do live sound, that's pretty much how an Allen and Heath desk feels like. And that's how Logic feels like to me. Whereas on the Android route, I had a Galaxy S4 for a year and I fucking hated it. It took me 6 months to basically configure it to work like an iPhone. So I thought, why don't I just have an iPhone? But that's how I feel about Yamaha desks, the QL series and also Pro Tools. It's so infinitely customizable. It's quite tricky to kind of get your head around. But the language is similar between the desks and the doors and the phones. But how you get to the end result is a different process. It's dead easy on iPhone, it's dead easy in Logic, and it's dead easy on Allen and Heath. It's a bit more convoluted on the other platforms, but I understand why they're, industry standards. But I'm enjoying Logic, Pro Tools, sorry. I've got this little bad boy, the UF8 from SSL. That is a fantastic product. Can't believe how good that is. So that's been my studio personal development journey. I'm sure Paul will fill you in. Basically, he's going to do an episode at one point as and when I need a week off or get ill or I'm away. So you'll have the pleasure of listening to him chat at some point as well. What I want to do is make a few thank yous at the moment. I need to thank Warren because it was Warren who actually, Paul and I knew each other, but he was the one who about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago said, yeah, why don't we do a British podcast? It'll be marvellous. Didn't know what we'd chat about. And he's like, right, we want to a no BS, straight talking podcast. You two, a northerner and a Scottish man with autism. You're the perfect duo for this. I don't think he quite knew what he was undertaking. And the first few episodes, let's just say we were censored quite heavily in the background. Speaking of Warren, the Produce Like a Pro Academy is a very good platform if you're looking for multi-tracks to practice your mixing and mastering with. I know myself and Paul have numerous tracks of our own original music, which I think would be quite cool to host somewhere for people to practice with. I'm figuring that out. I've considered hosting that stuff on my website before behind a paywall, but I don't really have enough tracks to make the paywall worthwhile, and I don't write and create and produce tracks frequently enough to contribute anything significant. So that's an idea. Again, leave thoughts and comments. Leave your thoughts if you have any thoughts about that, and if you'd like to get multi-tracks from me and Paul, our music is available online. This is not a shameless plug. The idea is genuinely to have resources to help people. And if you don't have access to multi-tracks, the Produce Like a Pro Academy, they have hundreds of multi-tracks. You've got a lot of artists that Warren works with, writing great songs, and Mark Daniel Nelson works with as well. He's a wonderful mix engineer. Those files are recorded at Warren's studio, which is great. Well, most of it was at his old studio that we visited in LA in April last year. So, the quality of those is very good, and because they're using them, the more high-end equipment for a lot of the original stuff. So it's a great resource for that. The second thank you I want to make while I'm here on my own is to you guys, because when we do our mix battles, we get a lot of comments from you guys, and as we've discussed in the podcast numerous times, we always consider everything said. Now, whether we take on board the comments or not is a different matter. Sometimes we agree with what's been said. Sometimes genuine problems that we've overlooked have been highlighted, and that's great, and we're very grateful for that feedback. Other times we'll think, okay, well, I understand what they're saying, but I disagree, or there's a reason I've chosen to do that and not what they're suggesting, etc. Then we have the debate of translation, which definitely check out last week's episode if you haven't about translation, because that is pretty Fascinating. But we are very lucky to have so many people effectively mentoring us as well. Don't get me wrong, it's a bold thing to put your mixes out on the internet because everyone wants to find the one thing wrong with your mix. And mentally, that can be difficult. That's something I've struggled with in the past where it can get a bit overwhelming. And this leads me to a very good point regarding mentoring. We've been fortunate to have Marcel, who used to master our stuff early in the day before Paul decided that it was probably better just to deliver our mixes without being influenced by the sound of mastering for more direct comparison, which is a fair point. I kind of think we should do both. We may bring Marcel back in on that in the future. He's a great mastering engineer. If you need someone, his links are in the description below. But there was a time regarding mentoring from other people and comments from other people and feedback where Paul and I were both asking everyone we knew. You know, we were speaking to Tim Palmer. We were speaking to Joe Carell. We speaking to M. Chura. Paul's probably reached out to Prizia. I haven't personally about this, but, sending these guys mixers and asking them for feedback. And they've been very kindly giving us feedback. We've not taken the piss and asked them every week, but we are in an immensely fortunate position to get that feedback. Now, some people are more helpful than others. Warren has been very helpful as well. He's regularly taken time with us in the early days. But we have been very lucky with that. And as an extension of that, we also feel like you guys are mentors. So we appreciate all the comments. Keep them coming. The third people we have to thank are the sponsors of the podcast. Now, don't think, boring podcast sponsorship, whatever, advert, clock forward. The reality is, without DistroKid sponsoring us, they do pay us a monthly fee to feature their products. The reason we can do this podcast is because they pay us, because Paul and we would want to do this anyway, but we're so busy and trying to earn a living doing different things. It literally would not be feasible for us to do this. This would just be an unpaid hobby if we were to do this on our own. So thank you, DistroKid, for sponsoring us. Now, Paul and I, and it turns out Dan Worrell, do actually use DistroKid. I've got all my music uploaded on DistroKid. It's so fast. You can get songs onto Spotify within 24 hours. Now, I remember back in the day using CD Baby, when this would take, you had to upload stuff 4 to 6 weeks in advance because that's how long it would take to get music onto Apple Music. Apple Music's still a bit slow. They can be a bit slack, about 3 weeks maybe. But Spotify have their shizzle together, and your song will be online in 24 hours. And it obviously goes to Tidal, TikTok, YouTube, Amazon Music, Instagram, and Facebook, and so on. But the way it's useful is there's loads of tools if you're promoting music up front of the release. Hyper follow means that people can follow links. Pre-save your singles. And they'll get notified when that is out. And in some cases, it will automatically be downloaded to their library. I think that's the case on Apple Music. And you can sync lyrics for Spotify and Apple Music. If you do cover songs as well, they can sort out the licensing for that for you, which is useful. And then if you want to get your song available on Shazam and iPhone Siri, if they hear your song somewhere, they can hold their phone up and they can download it. But pricing-wise, the Musician, the basic plan is, £1.92 a month? $23 a year, so £20? And that's unlimited songs, unlimited uploads, Spotify verified check mark. You also get a YouTube Music account, I think, through that. And there's loads of artwork creating tools, as you've probably heard in the other adverts. So thanks to DistroKid for sponsoring the podcast and making this possible. We do genuinely hope and believe that we're delivering value to you guys. Again, let us know in the comments. So just to finish on a subject that is very close to my heart for many reasons, and that is the mental health side of doing what we do and mixing. For example, dealing with mentors. Now, I came to mixing from doing live sound. I had extensive experience in that. I ran my own business for 7 years. Worked for production companies, corporate companies, and so on. Worked on every desk you can think of in every different format, from soul-destroying corporate events to, live sound for 12, 16-piece bands. Challenging, but a lot of fun. And I thought the transition to mixing in the studio would be relatively easy. In theory, the processes and the methods are the same, but actually the methods are quite different in terms of what takes primary focus. Live sound, you've often got no sound check. You might have a line check if you're lucky, if your musicians turn up on time. Good luck getting your singers on time. You're doing things on the fly, and often painfully and stressfully in the client's first dance if you're doing sound at weddings. Priority is kick drum, because that's what people are dancing to, and vocals, because that's how people recognize the song. The rest of it, fill it in as you go. And you're dealing with a different room every night. You're having to very quickly go into a room, clap your hands, check out where the resonances are, figure out where any comb filtering might be in the best place for the subwoofers would be, making sure they're not equidistant from any two walls for cancellation issues, as you'll know if you have subs in your studio. Studio sound, you've obviously got a lot more consistency, a consistent room, which hopefully you've treated, a consistent sound if you've got room correction. And I very quickly realized that there was a lot more to mixing in the studio that I was going to have to learn from mixing live, and a lot of refinement I had to make. And Paul's been really helpful. Doing this podcast has been really helpful for me, and I think him, so both of us, in terms of mentoring each other to prompt each other when there's things wrong with each other's mixes, and basically having a mix sparring partner. Paul and I might not admit it, but there is an element of competition between us, as I'm sure you guys have picked up. I think that's human nature. I think that's human nature amongst musicians. And I think it's healthy if done in the way we do it, which is a very respectful and encouraging and genuinely nurturing kind of loving way. I know we've learned a lot off each other. I wouldn't have come across Ceilings of Sound if I hadn't done this podcast with Paul, which has revolutionized my vocal sound. I wouldn't have considered what clipping was. I'd seen videos on it, didn't give a shit. Now I realize the value of it. So if you guys can find a mentor and do a similar thing with, trust me, it'll be so beneficial. Even if it's just a mentoring group, I've got a group of friends who are, professional mix engineers around the country in the UK, and we chat regularly. We share stories, horror stories, positive stories, tips and advice on plugins and things like that. So shout out to Andrish and Justin and Stu. You guys have been really helpful. So if you guys can find a mentor group like that, people you can trade ideas off, get second perspectives on mixes. Because the chances are, if you're developing like Paul and I have been, you have a sound in your mind and you'll shoot for that, but it might just be wrong. Like I would put way too much low end in. I got the analog gear and I was like, yeah, cool. 50 hertz on my API on the kick drum. Yeah, slam that in, great. But then the balance was all wrong, and I'd compensate for that with loads of top end, and then I wouldn't really have any mid-range, and that was one of my first major hurdles, was undoing the natural scoop that I was leaning towards. Paul had a similar thing. He had a tilt. He had more top end than low end, and he had to fix that. Now, to an extent, mastering can fix that, but if we're perfectionists, which most of us are, we want to be right in the mix. But having that external dialogue is the only way, really, that I've had those problems slammed home to me and realized that I needed to fix them. Paul's got a couple of mentors with Emra and Marcel as well, our mastering guy, and he's been very kind. So if you work with him, but he'll probably give you feedback if you ask about the mix, which is really helpful. But this brings me to the mental health point, which is, for someone like myself, I've needed to dig deep and find a real sense of security and self-belief in what I'm doing. Now, it's great to have people telling you how to improve, and it's great to have hundreds of people commenting on videos. But if you listen to every one of them, as we talked about in last week's episode regarding translation, you're going to have completely polarizing opposite opinions, and you're going to go crazy. You will not know what's right. What I would suggest is, if you've got the guy who's got the Grammy or has the #1 in his country, that maybe they're the opinions you can be listening and trusting a little bit more than other people's. But like I've said, I feel I can learn something off absolutely everyone. Even someone who picked up Logic yesterday may know a key command that I don't know. So I can learn something from everyone. But when you get all those suggestions, it's a good activity to make yourself push yourself and develop your own sense of confidence in your own ability, because not everyone's going to be right. Not everyone's going to be listening on the same system as you or as good a system, or they might be listening on better systems and they might have a point. But you've got to get to a point where, and it's a good place to be, where it's okay to disagree with people. It's okay to say, actually, I'm doing this way because I think it's better. I take on board what you're saying, but I disagree with it. Or actually, that's just wrong. Or maybe you've overlooked something. Or, okay, I have overlooked something. Totally right. Take that on board. So the beauty of this podcast for Paul and me and Paul and myself has been taking all of these external voices and channeling them combined with our own research. I mean, Paul is endlessly researching stuff and messaging me like, have you seen this? Do you know about this? What's this? And I'm like, yeah, no, don't care. Right. Okay. I should care. Right. I'll look into it. Okay. Yeah. I'll watch that. Cool. Yeah. Okay. I've seen that. Have you considered this? Maybe try this, maybe try that. It's been so fundamental in our journeys, I think. And I hope Paul agrees with me on this. Really fun, instrumental, pun intended, to us developing to the point where we have done. So my suggestion to you guys to round this off is find a mentor, find people you can spar off creatively, constructively. That's always been the essence of this podcast. Hopefully that comes across. It's a very trusting and nurturing and helpful and loving environment that we do it in. It's really beneficial. I can't recommend it enough. But also be aware that you need to, at some point, just trust yourself, trust your instincts. If you put in the work, it will come. Now, for me, what I overlooked from moving from live sound to the studio side was I underestimated how long that would take, how long that transition would take to get what I consider good enough to be a professional mix engineer. Now, clients are coming in, which is great, and we will always be comparing ourselves to the best guys. If you're not comparing yourself to Spike Stent and Jason Joshua, what's the point? Don't get me wrong, as a yardstick, it's good to compare yourself to your peers and your competitors, because you need to know where you stand and are you delivering quality in comparison to those guys. But if you're not striving for the absolute best, I wonder what the point is. And I know Paul's always anally retentively going after the nth degree to try and figure out what Spike's doing, and rabbit holes. But to put that in perspective, even MSM, he still is striving for that nth degree, and he's massively successful. So on that positive bombshell, it's been emotional. I'm sorry Paul wasn't with you this week. If you have got this far into the video and you've just been listening to me mumbling on the whole time, thank you. Appreciate your time. Check out the links for all the applications and softwares that I mentioned earlier. They're really helpful. Thank you again to DistroKid. Get 30% off your first year's subscription using the Working Audio Tools podcast VIP link in the description below. Guys, we really appreciate your support. Feel free to share and like the podcast. If you're listening to this, you can watch it on YouTube. If you're watching this, you can listen to it out and about on the streaming platforms, or if you have YouTube Premium on in the background as well. It's been emotional. This has been the Working Audio Tools podcast. Hopefully we'll be back next week, with Paul, who wants to discuss compression, I believe. So we'll nerd out on that very soon. Thanks, guys.